It's about that time of year where we start getting little bits of information coming out about the new Football Manager game, which will of course be FM25. There was some big information released yesterday, but actually, unlike most years, we already do know a fair bit about the upcoming Football Manager game because when they announced FM24 near enough a year ago now, there was some extra information about the future of Football Manager, which is going to lean very heavily into the next game that we'll be seeing in only a few months' time now. We're going to break down all the information in today's video that we know so far, so you're all up to date on the Football Manager news as we start getting more of it hopefully filtering through in the next coming weeks and months about the new game. So let's talk about everything we know about FM25 so far, starting with yesterday's news. And it was very big news. If you didn't hear about it some way, if you didn't see it on Twitter or social media, then I'm glad to be breaking this huge news to you. Some people saying, you know, this isn't really a big deal. I definitely think it is, and that is that the Premier League is coming to Football Manager. Now, you might all be thinking, I can play in the Premier League already, right? Well, yes, you can, but it's called the English Premier Division. There's no logos, no kits, no player faces for anybody in England. Those rights were always the ones that people wanted Sports Interactive to have, but they never did. Now, though, we have had the update for FM25, and going forward, the Premier League and Football Manager will be partnered, so you won't just have Brighton, who I think were partnered with FM, maybe Man City as well, but actually every single club in the league, all 20 clubs, and that includes, supposedly, Manchester United. If you don't know, there's a whole history of Manchester United and Football Manager that goes a while back, including FMSCOUT as well, so feel free to check that out if you want to. It was a long time before I started on the channel, but let's just say it's a pretty big deal that we're getting all of these club names officially, and kits, and player faces, and logos, including Manchester United, based on the past. Now, there's a few reasons I think this Premier League license is a big deal. One, of course, it's going to make everyone's game look a lot more valid and makes Football Manager look like a more valid product. Obviously, it already was, but just having these licenses does make it look a lot more professional. But there was a lot of people saying this isn't a big deal. I already had this by using download packs and mods, which is great, but that isn't something you should have to do, really, for a game like Football Manager that makes so much money, has so many players, and generally is one of the most respected video game franchises in the football space. So it's great to have these licenses now, but also you might have been able to do these downloads and mods. Some people wouldn't have been doing it for sure, and also console players, mobile players, there would have been no real way to be able to do this. So now it's going to look a lot more of a valid product if you were to download it. Let's say someone was new to the franchise, they picked up Football Manager, no longer will they be hit by all of these random blank faces for every single player. They're going to have real faces, real logos, real kits, and that can only be a benefit for the game going forward. So whilst it isn't a reason to buy the next FM game, it's not going to sell a product on its own, it definitely is a nice addition and something that a lot of people have wanted for a long time. Now, I mentioned we did know some extra information about FM25, and it was from this article, which is nearly a year ago now, which might give you a rough timeline of when we should start expecting some more FM25 news. But in this article, they announced FM24, talked about what was going on in the Football Manager development space, and spoke about some highlights from FM23 too. All of this, though, seems like quite a while away, but what you would have saw, or if you didn't read this article, what you're now going to learn is that they said many a time that FM24 was almost the last of its kind, and for the first time in a long time, we are actually getting what they're calling an actual sequel to Football Manager. They mentioned that FM25 is going to be nothing like they've ever done before, and this is for a few reasons. The first thing, and the thing that's probably the easiest to talk about without getting into the nitty-gritty details of everything, is that women's football will be coming in FM25. Whether that's on release, I don't know, because they do say here the FM25 cycle will also see the long-awaited introduction of women's football. Now, if that still goes ahead, then obviously that's going to be a nice benefit to the game. Now, I know there'll be a lot of people out there saying, I never asked for women's football, why are they adding this? I'd rather they focus on the Football Manager that we know. And you know what? You don't have to play the women's football if you don't want to, the same way you don't have to play the draft mode if you don't want to, but it's something that the game should definitely have. It's going to attract more players, hopefully. Maybe people that only watch women's football will now get on board, whether that's girls or boys, and either way, I just think it's something that's going to be a nice addition. Now, at this point, we don't know whether it'll be an offshoot of the game, maybe a separate download. I doubt it would be. Maybe it'll be a case of when you start a save, you can choose men's or women's football, or maybe it'll all be joined together where you could start managing a men's team and move on to a women's team, or vice versa. That could be an interesting way to do things, but I don't know where they're going to go, and also also the fact they say it will come in the FM25 cycle. Whether that's on release, I'm not necessarily sure. We'll find out more soon, I imagine, but women's football is going to be a nice addition. It's definitely something that should be there, so you can tick off women's football and Premier League licenses. There's some nice additions to the game, but I think the thing that's really going to sell it to a lot of current Football Manager players will be the fact that it's moving on to a new engine. Now, the engine that they're going to be using is the Unity engine. Now, I can't say I know much about game development, whether this is a good engine or a bad engine. I have no idea, to be honest with you guys. I know they've used it for a lot of well-known games like Genshin Impact, and also I think they mentioned City Skylines, which I believe I had for free on PlayStation through PlayStation Plus. Either way, doesn't matter, but let's just say Unity is a new engine, and it means they are kind of building the game from ground up, from both the in-game aspect of it in terms of the match engine, but also the general user interface. Now, how that will look, there's no real way to know until Football Manager starts showing us some further information. For anyone that is expecting like FIFA graphics, I don't think we'd ever get that, but I did see RDF Tactics did a tweet the other day, and I think he was kind of right. I think it was RDF anyway, sorry if I'm giving the wrong person credit, where he said he doesn't want it to be, you know, FIFA graphics, but he just wants it to look like you're almost watching a real game. So when someone walks past your screen, it does look like you're watching a real football match until you stop for a few seconds, then you realise, okay, this isn't a real match. Unlike what it is currently, where you know you're looking at weird, janky little animated bodies, I'm sure you'll still get elements of that, but it'll be really interesting to see what it looks like on this new engine. We can't say whether it's going to be everything we wanted or not until we start seeing more, but it is something that we've been asking for a while, so the fact that they're doing something with it does suggest it's going to be a big step forward. The UI changing in Football Manager as well, the menu system and whatnot, is something that I think will be of great benefit. A lot of us enjoy the way the game is now, and that is fine, but I know a lot of people who have recently got into Football Manager who are quite confused and overwhelmed by the screens that we get hit with, the amount of different tabs you can go into, and it is basically like you're just on a website or a spreadsheet, click into one tab, into another tab, then into the contract section, then contract negotiation. That's just one example, but it just shows you there is a lot to the game, and I think making it a more streamlined process, not getting rid of any of the detail, but just making the general experience of Football Manager better, it's only going to be of benefit to both current players and new players too. The other thing they half mention, I don't know exactly where it is in this article, but they do mention the fact that new gen faces they felt had kind of stalled. A lot of us did look at new gen faces and thought they weren't in a great place, so it seems like they are going to be a change in new gen faces. They don't necessarily say that outright, I don't think, in this article, but they do say that they felt quite stuck with the new gen faces they had on the old engine, so moving to this new engine might mean that we see some more photorealistic new gen faces instead of the fake cartoon characters with weird eyebrows that we all get in our saves. But so far, that's pretty much everything that we know. A new engine, a new UI, potential upgrades to new gen faces, the Premier League coming, a true sequel, and also women's football. It's all seeming like we're going in the right direction with Football Manager. I don't think we'll necessarily see many in-game changes, if that makes sense, the way that we've had maybe set-piece coaches being introduced in recent years. I think stuff like that is going to stay the same, but it's actually the way the game is built from ground up is going to change. So I wouldn't expect too many small additions, but I think we're going to get a very good game here. I'm crossing my fingers anyway. It'll be interesting to see what comes out about the game. But don't worry, anything that comes out, any news, we're going to cover on this channel. So make sure you're subscribed, like the video if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.